Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Sekani, a podcast for people in their 20s who are trying to figure out life and not get lost along the way. Today's guest is Wednesdae Reim, an expressive art therapist, author, educator, and doctoral researcher whose work sits at the intersection of psychology, creativity, and healing. As a board certified art therapist and licensed counselor, Wednesday specializes in helping people recover from complex trauma, eating disorder, and body disconnection through somatic art therapy and creative expression, drawing from both professional expertise and lived expertise. They are passionate about helping people reconnect with themselves and discover that healing can happen not just through words, but through art, movement, and creativity. Wednesday, welcome to Conversations with Sekani. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
All right, so I want you to take us back, right, to your 20s, right?
Oh God.
So tell us your story. Who were you during that season of your life, and what dreams were you pursuing then?
Oh gosh. Okay, so when I was in my 20s, I was living in the UK and was in university, but definitely not taking it as seriously as I should have. And not to judge myself, but definitely was lost. Definitely was like in between wanting to do three things. I was a preschool teacher, but I really wanted to be a writer or an artist. Being an art therapist was something I discovered in high school, but I think that in my 20s, a lot of the voices that I grew up with that weren't always super supportive played in my head and told me I wasn't smart enough or good enough or didn't have enough to offer. And so I think my 20s were like half a disaster for the first 5 years, where I was just kind of like traveling and trying to figure out life and making normal bad choices that 20-year-olds make, like going out at night instead of studying or not taking the paper or reading the book seriously. Um, and then I would say I moved home when I was like 24, moved back in with my parents, was kind of like, I have to take this super seriously, enrolled in a university in the US, was taking a bunch of classes with people that were younger than me and was around people that when I was their age, I was not as mature as them. And I actually think it really pushed me to be like, time to make a choice. What are we going to do in the world? What do we want to do? And that's where a bunch of my art and creative writing professors were like, maybe you should go back to the thing that you thought you wanted to do in the first place. Maybe the younger version of you is actually smarter than you ever gave them credit for. And I think that's where I did a lot of therapy and I made a lot of art and I took a ton of extra classes and really figured out that I wasn't going to be happy unless I was offering the world something more than just whatever made me happy. That a lot of times for me, happiness comes from not just my own happiness, but people around me being healthy and happy and loved and cared for, and that my presence with them adds to their life rather than subtracts. And so I was mentored by my best friend's mom, who her name was Maria. She actually started a media project for inner city kids who didn't have places to go. We taught them how to make their own radio shows, which I mean, now we do podcasts, but not then. How to do CGI back when CGI wasn't a big thing. And she taught me so much. And she really was just like, you're so smart. Like, don't waste your youth trying to convince yourself you're worthy. Just go do it. And I went and did it. And I feel like that was the push I needed, was someone to remind me that there were other voices in my life that not only thought I was smart enough and good enough, but kind of watched everything from afar and was waiting for me to be ready to kind of realize that. And oh, now we're here.
Wow. Oh, okay, okay. So now I know it's okay for, to have everything all figured out in your 20s and all. Like that's part of life, basically.
I, I think
Right.
so.
Yeah, and I remember speaking with a guest that was in his 40s. He said he still don't have it all figured out, right? We're all
No,
just trying. Exactly.
it's true.
So,
if it helps, I tell everyone all the time, I'm like, you can read the bio, you can go to the website, you can look at the resume. There are things that a human being has done. That doesn't mean we feel like we have it together. That doesn't reflect every other place in our life. I mean, I tell everyone, like, I'm a messy person. I still go to therapy. I still am trying to figure a lot of things about life out. And I am turning 40. Um, and the exciting part for me, and I hope this is true for other people as they get older, is how cool is it to be able to turn 40, and how cool is it to be 40 and still not know what you're doing and realize maybe none of us will ever know what we're doing, but that's okay because we can have that together. And I think that that's really the important piece of it.
Exactly. Wow. You're not the first person to say it. I, I've had a lot of guests that say they still don't know what they're doing, right? And that's the
Nope.
beauty of life, funny enough. That's actually the beauty of life. As long as you do what makes you happy, right? As long as you're
Yeah.
happy, you're doing what makes you heal, heal from past traumas and everything.
Yep.
That's what matters actually. So yes, I want us to talk about your work, right? Healing through creativity. So many people think of art as simply like a hobby, right? So how can creative expression become a powerful tool for emotional well-being or emotional healing?
Sure. So, I mean, this is my favorite thing in the entire world, because I just find it so fascinating. So, I mean, the first thing is there's so much good research about the ways in which art and different forms of art, so like in expressive arts therapy, it's not just like studio art, it's also dance movement, drama, creative writing. And there's all of this stuff that talks about how it actually like calms your nervous system. So, like your parasympathetic nervous system that goes off when you're fight, flight, freeze, all those can be calmed by art. So, I think part of it is kind of the natural process that, when facilitated appropriately, right, does that. For me, the cooler part in art therapy specifically is how there are different ways to assess artwork, use them as assessments to, we call them directives, but like create these different directives where I go, okay, this person has body image issues. They've been dealing with an eating disorder. There's a lot of history about the trauma with their body. So asking them to do something with their body is probably not a good idea. It'll probably trigger them. So what if we start by making some art that represents their experience in their body, but we create a container. And so we might actually physically create a container or make an image of their safe place. And they have a place to go back to as we're working through the rest of that work. And then I build on it with different forms of art or movement. Um, I really like drama therapy. So sometimes we'll act out things like the client will even tell me a character to play for them so they can have a conversation with a different part of themselves. Um, so what I find really fascinating for me is I could sit here and talk with you about your body all day, and I can tell you how beautiful you are and how much you should love yourself. And that sounds great. But the reality is, if you don't feel it in your body, it's just words, and you're not going to feel it in your body by just talking, so we have to do. And so that's, for me, the biggest part of it is the doing. And then often what I'll do is I'll pair it with that somatic therapy, so that's where the body and the brain and everything get to come together in the process, because it focuses on that mind body connection. It really helps with things like trauma and chronic stress, all the feelings that are stored in the body. And there's so many different ways to do it based on someone's culture or ability status, or just like what you're into as a human being. Um, that I think makes it such a comforting experience for people.
Wow. Ooh, okay. I think that was I understand now, right? You just simplified it for me. And speaking about, connecting with our body, because I love the analogy you use where you say you could tell me how beautiful I look, and if you don't think you're beautiful, right? It's all just words. So what do you think are like daily habits one can, begin practicing to help them be more connected with their body and their mind and just feel good basically about themselves.
So I always think that's different for each person, but I will try to give you a concise answer.
Mm,
Um, I think that for some people, I think this is important. For some people, loving yourself is harder depending upon how you identify, because the world's just not a nice place, not to be negative, right? Like
Right.
people can be racist and homophobic and ableist. And so it's very hard when you're also in a culture that tells you you can't be beautiful because you're different. So
Mm,
often with clients, what I'll start with is like, let's talk about the reality and then let's come up with something that's validating enough without invalidating the experience of being oppressed. Because that's not
mm,
something that I can fix on my own in a session, but I can put out there that I know that that exists, that we each have our own experiences based on our identities, and that asking you to go out in the world and think that you're fabulous all the time when the whole world doesn't reflect you is a really big expectation. So we start there. And then I kind of talk to clients often about, what do you wish you could feel? What's the feeling you want in your body? And then we might come up with a daily art activity. A lot of my clients used to do a lot of like art journaling. We would actually make them together. And then instead of writing, they would make an image every day. And then they'd bring it to sessions. So we'd have 7 to 8 images between sessions to work
mm,
with. And you could do that for 5 minutes in the morning when you wake up. Even before you get ready, before you brush your teeth, just tell yourself, I'm going to wake up and this is the thing that I'm going to do to start my day. And we would make our own prompts based on what they're dealing with. So it's specialized to each person. And anyone can do this for themselves. You can tell yourself, here's a prompt, I want to be able to draw this, or collage it, or even listen to a song sometimes for people that don't feel super creative that just helps you start your day feeling like your body is being validated. And then for my clients that are more like in tune with their body or more comfortable like with the doing of things, it might just be doing a mindful walk where they note 5 things that they noticed that they really enjoyed that their body experienced. So, right, the wind against your skin, how birds
mm,
sound early in the morning when no one's around, right? Things where you start to appreciate what your body can do for you, not just how it looks. Um, and then we kind of go from there. Some of my clients really like to meditate and deep breathe in the morning. I'm super honest with people. You can get me to sit still that long to do it, even though I know how to do it. Um,
mm,
for me personally, a lot of my connection to my body that helps is movement. So that's something I talk to clients about is it's not about exercise. It's about what movement when you're doing it makes you feel like your body is joyful and being celebrated,
mm,
and then lean into that, right? So if you go running because you like running, but it makes you feel exhausted and you're not enjoying it, but when you sit at the edge of your bathtub and like kick your feet in the water, that feels good. Why can't you do that for 5 minutes in the morning? Because we're adults and it feels silly. Be silly. Let your body feel silly. I think that that's important. I think adults, we focus so much on beauty in a very narrow beauty standard. And we forget that, like, part of being beautiful is that we're all so different from each other. And I think that helping people learn how to lean into that by learning what makes their body unique ultimately is the
mm.
most important part.
Oh, okay. So it's like understanding your body, right? Because what works for you might not work for the other person. So it's about
Yeah.
understanding what you like, understanding what makes you feel more of yourself in your body, right? Ooh,
Yeah.
okay. Because I'm thinking of a whole lot of things I used to do, right? I have I draw sometimes, right? My art book is here. Sometimes I just, carve things and it just is healing, right? It just makes you happy
Yeah.
and feel more connected, right? Journaling. So I don't know if journaling counts, but it works for me. So,
It absolutely counts. Anything that
oh,
works counts, in my opinion. That's what I say to clients all the time. If it makes you happy, why doesn't it count? Because
hmm.
it's a big therapeutic thing. I think the secret to therapy is not everything is some big therapeutic thing. It's just hard for people to admit that out loud.
Wow. Okay, all right. Okay, so yes, thank you, Wednesday. And another thing is, you've written books like Queer Expressions and Hex and Flesh, if I'm pronouncing it correctly,
Yep.
right? Okay, so how has writing become part of your own healing journey?
Um, I'll tell you what I tell all my clients. I think the most amazing thing about being human is that no matter what culture you're from, we all write and we all make art and we all tell stories. It's actually the thing that every culture has in common. Um, and that's historically throughout time, from the time people wrote on caves to now. And so for me, every time that I get to write, whether it's poetry or an academic book, I feel like I get to participate in this like greater narrative that connects all of us because it means I get to tell a story. And someday someone will hopefully go to a bookstore and pick up a book, and that story will mean something to them when it won't to somebody else. And I think about it, you go to a bookstore, how many stories?
Mm.
Go to a library, how many stories exist? Um, And for me, a bigger thing about writing and art in general has always been when we live in a culture that I think tries to take our stories from us to silence us, the creating of a story and putting it out there is such a powerful part of resistance against the way that our world is right now. That writing for me has become so much more meaningful than just, well, I get to say I wrote a book. Because, yeah, that's exciting for a lot of us, especially if that was a dream. But for me now, it's actually about what it represents and what it pushes against rather than just, I got to do a cool thing.
Mm. Wow. Okay, so another thing you often say is healing from the neck down, right? So what
Mhm.
does that mean, and why is, talking alone always not enough, right?
Um, People are really good about getting trapped in their heads. We live in a world that makes us think all the time. I also think that, and I say this as someone who's like at a university and teaches, we've really undervalued what people have to offer that isn't this highly like intellectual experience. Like we judge smarts by degrees and books and all those things. And again, I've done them and that's super amazing and I'm super grateful. And when you get trapped in your head, you can also get trapped in your trauma narrative. You can also get trapped in your depression or your anxiety because it's in your body, but you're only in your head. So you're completely disconnected. Your body can't discharge anything and you're not actually able to experience what relief feels like completely. The way I say it is, everyone experiences anxiety differently, but a lot of people will feel it in their stomach. It might make you feel sick. It might feel like bad butterflies, but it's there. And what if you can't feel that? So, you don't even know what you're feeling. You just know your brain's completely dysregulated. Um, and so for me, a lot of things with expressive arts and movement is connecting is really hard when you've disassociated from your body. But once we start dropping into our bodies a little bit at a time so that we're not completely flooded, that connection is the first step to being able to actually heal or come up with coping skills or even figuring out what somebody needs to move forward. Because let's face it, some people have depression that we can manage it with therapy and medication. That's not going to go away forever. But if you know what it feels like in your body, or you know what your body likes, or you know what art that you make that feels better, um, it means that we can help someone integrate as much as possible in a way that feels good for them. And that's my favorite part is this isn't like we do a protocol, right? And protocols are great, but I can't change a protocol for you. I just have to do it with a lot of art and expressive arts therapy, I can change every single second to what your specific experience is. And that gives your body exactly what it needs and deserves rather than like what a book tells you to do.
Oh, okay. So this just shows that, people are unique, right? Everyone is unique. And the healing process is not the same for everyone, right? And it reminded me of it reminds me of a series I'm currently seeing, Orange is the New Black, right? So there's this lady in the series, she has kind of like according to her mind is always she's always anxious, she's not calm and everything. And what she does that makes her calm is cleaning, right? She just has this visual representation that, she's if she's cleaning something, she feels like she's clearing up her mind, right? And it just makes her feel better. And I was like, wow, if that works for her, then there's something else that could just work for someone else out there, right? You just have to figure out
Yeah.
what it is, right? Good. Okay, so you've also dedicated your work, right, to creating spaces where people feel seen and understood, right? So why do you think belonging is such an important part of healing?
Um, because trauma, especially systemic trauma that we've all experienced, is all about putting each of us in our little boxes and separating us and disconnecting us and isolating us. And trauma is already hard enough, but experiencing trauma alone, being made to feel unwelcome or kind of the stereotypical crazy, that actually makes people so much worse. Believe it or not, I know. And we live in
Wow.
a world where we live in a system that likes us isolated and hurting. And so when people feel seen and they feel heard and they're part of community and they're around people that reflect their identities back to them in some way, that is healing on its own before we even do anything, because you're seeing that people like you can exist in their bodies, can exist happy or happy enough, and that they want you here because you're part of something that's greater than yourself. And I think right now we really honestly need that more than ever. We're just all so isolated and traumatized. Even if you've never experienced an individual trauma, just being in the world right now is enough. Um, and so I think the more we create spaces where people can see themselves and therefore feel not just welcome, but affirmed, right? It feels safe to be around people that are like us, especially if you have a marginalized identity. That's so important right now. And I think sometimes that can be enough for somebody to start their healing journey.
Hmm. Oh, all right. So yes, thank you, Wednesday. And
Yeah.
finally, right, like the sole purpose of my podcast is giving advice to the younger ones, probably those who are currently struggling with comparison. Because I feel like we're in the era where the whole social media thing just makes us feel less of ourselves when we see our age mates doing some kind of things, right? So what advice would you have for people who are struggling with their mental health, those who are trying to get better, those struggling with comparison and different things, right? So what advice would you have for them?
I usually say go to therapy, and then I go, well, sometimes when you're young, you can't access therapy. So I want to be realistic about that. So I think if you can't access therapy or that support, putting yourself out there and finding elders that look like you, that are like you, that can support you, because we all want to be around you, believe it or not. Um, and that being young in this world is really hard. That comparison is really hard, but you actually don't know what anybody's life is like outside of that little box on that little grid in the computer, just like they don't know what yours is like. So you get to decide the narrative that you create about somebody else, just like they do about you. And this is your time to get to rewrite your story how you want without somebody else dictating what your story should be.
Oh, all right. So yes, thank you, Wednesday. I would like to say
Yeah.
this has been insightful for me, right? I've got to learn a whole lot, and I really hope my listeners will do the same as well, right? And it brings me to the final episode or the final part of my podcast, rather. I call it the rapid fire segment. You could either answer with a word or a phrase, starting now. So, what is one word that describes your 20s?
Ooh, chaotic.
Okay. All right. So what is a book that has influenced you deeply?
Uh, Fearing the Black Body, the Racial Origins of Fat Phobia by Dr. Sabrina Strings.
Hmm. Okay. Wow. All right. So what is one creative practice you couldn't live without?
Painting.
Okay. And finally, what is one lesson every young person should learn about themselves?
That we're gonna make mistakes and they're gonna feel really big, but sometimes those really big mistakes lead us to really cool places.
Okay, so yes, thank you, Wednesday. And finally, before you go, where can listeners get to, learn more about you and also connect with you?
Of course. So my Instagram is queer art therapist, and my website is Wednesdae .org. And then my private practice is at Rainbow Recovery.
Oh, okay. And I'm gonna put a link in the show notes so it's
Okay.
easily accessible for listeners. And to my listeners, I want to say thanks for tuning in to Conversations with Sekani. If this episode sparked something in you, just as it did in me, make sure to share to someone you think might need this and also subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes. Once again, thank you, Wednesday. Do have a wonderful day ahead of you.